Providence Municipal Court, Tuesday afternoon. A 16-year-old girl walks through the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom, and the first thing Judge Frank Caprio notices isn't her hoodie or her slouch or the defiance written all over her face. It's what's in her ears. White earbuds, cords disappearing into her pocket, music still playing, and something in her file, something sitting quietly between the lines, suggests this is not a simple shoplifting case. Not even close. I am Frederick, and I cover courtroom stories that stay with you long after they're over. Pull up a chair. This one matters. If this story hits you the way it hit me, go ahead and tap that like button. It genuinely helps more people find it. Her name was Madison Pierce, 16 years old, grey hoodie pulled up indoors, faded jeans, sneakers worn down at the edges. She walked in like someone who had already decided this room and everyone in it could go straight to hell. One hand buried in her hoodie pocket, eyes fixed on a spot on the floor, no acknowledgement of the bench, the bailiff, or anyone else present. Judge Caprio watched her approach the podium with the same steady patience he brought to every case. He had seen thousands of people stand in that exact spot, scared ones, remorseful ones, arrogant ones. But he paused on her. There was something in the way she carried herself that read less like teenage attitude and more like someone who had been hurting for a very long time and had simply run out of ways to say so. He asked her, calmly, to remove her earbuds and give the proceeding her attention. She didn't move. Not right away. She stood there for a long moment, as if the request were optional. Then, slowly, with deliberate slowness, she reached up and pulled out one earbud. Just one. Let it dangle against her chest, music still leaking from the other. She raised her eyes to him for the first time, and the look she gave him was not nerves, not guilt. It was contempt. She told him this was stupid, that she shouldn't be there. The gallery shifted. Whispers ran through the benches. An older man near the back shook his head, but Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. He opened the file in front of him and began to read. The charge: shoplifting from a CVS pharmacy on Maple Street. $87 worth of makeup. Store manager had pressed charges after Madison became aggressive when confronted at the exit. He noted the charge aloud, then asked her directly whether the account was accurate. She shrugged, said the store made millions, said they wouldn't miss a few lipsticks and some mascara. Her tone was acidic, each word delivered like it cost her nothing, like she had practiced not caring so long it had become automatic. Here's what I noticed at this point, just watching the way this unfolded. She wasn't performing indifference for the room, she was living inside it. That's a different thing. People who are putting on a show for an audience eventually glance around to check if it's working. Madison wasn't glancing at anyone. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and looked at her directly. He told her that stealing remained serious, regardless of the store's revenue, that the law didn't operate on a sliding scale of victim wealth. But then he said he was more concerned about something else in the file. He told her this was her third shoplifting offence in 8 months. The first two had been dismissed with warnings, citing what the paperwork described as traumatic circumstances. He asked her what had been going on in her life. She told him that was none of his business, yanked the second earbud out with visible irritation, told him to give her community service, fine her, whatever, just get it over with so she could leave. The prosecutor stepped forward at that point. She mentioned that the security footage showed Madison hadn't just been vocal when the manager tried to stop her at the exit. She had physically shoved the store manager, a 62-year-old woman, hard enough to send her stumbling into a display case. The manager, out of sympathy for Madison's circumstances, had declined to file assault charges, but the incident was on record. A heavier murmur moved through the gallery. People leaned in. This had shifted from a simple citation into something with a pattern, and everyone could sense it. Madison's face flushed. She said the manager barely stumbled, said everyone was being dramatic. And honestly, that one landed harder than the defiance. You can understand rage. You can understand a teenager with nothing left deciding to stop cooperating with a system that feels like it failed her. But the refusal to acknowledge that another person was hurt, that bothered me. That's not grief. That's something that's been left alone too long. Judge Caprio asked again, steady and calm, where her parents were. The file noted she lived with her grandmother. Madison's hands curled into fists inside her hoodie pocket. Her jaw tightened. She told him again it was none of his business. He told her it actually was his business. When a young person appeared before him multiple times, when a pattern of escalating behaviour was visible, he needed to understand the full picture. He asked her again, using her first name this time, just, "Where are your parents, Madison?" Something about hearing her name said with genuine concern, rather than judicial authority, seemed to reach somewhere she wasn't expecting. Her face shifted, just briefly, just for a second, and her eyes filled with tears she pushed back down almost immediately. Then she said it flat and cold. "They're dead. Car accident 2 years ago. Both of them. Gone." She asked if that was what he wanted to hear. The courtroom went quiet. The kind of quiet where nobody wants to be the one to move first. The woman who had been whispering in the third row pressed a hand to her chest and stopped talking. An older man in the back removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, though they didn't need it. The court reporter's hands went still over her keyboard. Judge Caprio's entire bearing shifted. The judicial formality gave way to something more human. He told her he was truly sorry, that losing both parents at 14 was a kind of trauma that would undo most adults, let alone a child. He asked when it happened. She said 2 years ago last March. Drunk driver crossed the centre line on the way home from her aunt's house. They died on impact. And she said what clearly had been sitting inside her for a long time, that everyone kept telling her they died instantly. Like that was supposed to help, like that closed something. But nobody talked about what it was like for the people who didn't die, the ones who had to keep getting up every morning with the weight of it. I want to sit with that for a second, because that sentence, nobody talks about the people left behind who have to suffer every single day. That's not a teenager being dramatic. That's an observation most grieving adults can barely articulate. Judge Caprio leaned forward. He told her he couldn't imagine the weight she had been carrying. He told her he wanted to help, but that he needed her to work with him. She said she didn't need help, said everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to talk about feelings, and nobody could bring her parents back. So what was the point? Before the judge could respond, the bailiff approached the bench and murmured something. Judge Caprio looked at the file again, then back at Madison. He told her that her grandmother was present and had requested permission to address the court. Madison's composure broke sideways. She wasn't sad. She was furious. She said she had told her grandmother not to come. She didn't want her there. The back doors opened. An elderly woman came in slowly, using a walker, wearing a floral dress that had clearly been pressed carefully for the occasion. Her grey hair was pinned back. Her face carried the deep lines of someone who had been exhausted for a very long time. Not from illness, but from a kind of worry that doesn't let you sleep. She was maybe 73. The bailiff helped her to a seat in the front row of the gallery. When she finally looked up at her granddaughter, her eyes were full of tears. But there was love in them too, the kind that doesn't negotiate. Madison saw her and something tore open wider. She demanded to know why her grandmother was there, said she had told her not to come, said it had nothing to do with her. Judge Caprio's voice remained steady. He told Madison that her grandmother had every right to be present. She was the legal guardian. She cared about what happened. The grandmother raised one trembling hand. Her name was Dorothy Pierce. She introduced herself quietly to the court. She said that Madison had come to live with her after her daughter and son-in-law died. She said Madison was all she had left of her baby girl. Her voice broke on those words, and she had to pause before continuing. She said she had raised 3 children. She thought she knew how to help a teenager through something hard. But Madison was so angry all the time, and she didn't know what to do anymore. What happened next went off like a pressure valve. Madison screamed at her to shut up. Her face twisted, and everything she had been holding back for 2 years came out all at once. She said Dorothy wasn't even her real grandmother. She said she was just the old lady who got stuck with her because there was nobody else. She said Dorothy didn't want her, said nobody wanted her, said everyone was pretending because they had to. The gallery reacted audibly. Multiple people shook their heads. Someone muttered something. An older woman in the third row wiped tears from her eyes. But Dorothy Pierce did not look angry. She looked heartbroken. She reached one trembling hand toward her granddaughter and told her it wasn't true. Told her she loved her. Told her she was her granddaughter and that she loved her more than anything in this world. She asked her to please stop pushing everyone away. Tell me what you think in the comments. If you were in that courtroom watching that moment, Would you have found it in yourself to still have sympathy for Madison, or had she gone too far? Judge Caprio stood up from the bench. Judges rarely do that mid-proceeding. When it happens, the room pays attention. He didn't raise his voice. He told Madison that he understood she was in pain, that he could see she was drowning in grief and didn't know how to process it. But he told her directly that what she had just said to her grandmother, a woman who had opened her home, who had been trying to help her through the worst thing she had ever experienced, was cruel. And he wasn't going to allow it in his courtroom. Madison's breathing had gone ragged. Her eyes darted around like she was looking for a way out of a room she had no exit from. She told him he didn't understand anything, said he was sitting up there in his robe acting like he cared, but that he was just like everyone else. He saw a file, a case number, another kid to lecture and forget. She said nobody actually listened. He told her then, help him understand, talk to him. He was listening right now. She laughed, not with humour, it was a sharp, empty sound. She said talking hadn't helped anything. She said he was just going to send her to juvie or give her more community service or hand her off to another therapist who would ask her how she felt about everything. She said she was done. He tried one more time. His voice dropped lower, quieter. He told her that her grandmother was there because she loved her, that the system wasn't her enemy, that she didn't have to carry this alone. And something in those words, maybe because they landed too close to the exact wound, broke whatever was left of her restraint. Her right hand came out of her hoodie pocket. She was holding a small stone, smooth, round, about the size of a golf ball, painted with swirls of blue and grey. It was a decorative piece, the kind that sits on a living room mantel. People in the gallery would learn later that it had come from Dorothy Pierce's home, that Madison had taken it that morning. Nobody ever knew exactly why, whether she had planned something or had simply grabbed it in the grip of some feeling she couldn't name. She hurled it toward the bench with everything she had. Someone screamed. The bailiff lunged from across the room, but was too far. The stone travelled in a hard arc across the courtroom and struck the corner of the judge's bench with a crack that rang through the chamber. It bounced off the wood, clipped the gavel, sent it spinning, and rolled to a stop in the centre of the floor. Silence fell like a wall. Nobody moved. Madison stood there with her arms still extended, face completely white, the rage drained out of her instantly by the reality of what she had just done. Her mouth opened. No sound came. Then she whispered it. Oh my God. What did she do? The bailiffs moved immediately. Two flanked Madison, hands ready to restrain. A third positioned himself between her and the bench. The courtroom broke into voices. People standing, moving, talking over each other. The prosecutor stood with one hand pressed to her mouth. The court reporter's hands hung frozen above her keyboard. Dorothy Pierce had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Judge Caprio sat still. He hadn't moved since the stone hit. His hands were folded on the bench in front of him, expression unreadable. He looked down at the stone on the floor. Then he looked at Madison. The bailiff nearest to him spoke urgently, said they needed to place her in custody. Assault on a judicial officer, felony. Needed to process her immediately. Judge Caprio raised his hand, same quiet gesture he'd used before. He said, wait. Just wait. The bailiffs looked at each other. This was outside any procedure they knew. Every instinct and protocol said take her into custody now. But he kept his hand raised and they held. He stood, came down the 3 steps from the bench, walked to the stone on the floor. He bent down and picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and that's when he saw it. On the other side, painted in faded purple letters, was a single word. Hope. He held it up, turned it slowly so the word faced the room. His voice when he spoke was just above a whisper, but the silence in that courtroom was so complete it reached every row. He asked Madison where she had gotten it. She could barely form words. She said it was from her grandmother's house, said she had taken it that morning from the mantel. He asked if it meant something. She nodded, barely. Said her mother had painted it, before the accident. In an art class at the community centre, she had given it to Dorothy for her birthday. Dorothy's voice came from the gallery, thin and trembling. She said that stone was the last gift her daughter had ever given her, that her daughter had painted that word because she believed, no matter how hard things got, that hope was the one thing you didn't put down. Judge Caprio looked at the stone in his hands for a long moment. Then he looked at Madison. He said quietly that she had thrown hope at him. Madison's legs gave out. The bailiffs caught her arms as she sank toward the floor, and she said it finally, out loud, what had clearly been sitting in her chest for 2 years. She had no hope left. Nothing. Everything good in her life had died in that car, and she had just been pretending to be alive ever since. Judge Caprio knelt down beside her on the courtroom floor. His knees protested. His back didn't want to do it. He did it anyway, lowering himself until he was at her eye level. He told her about something from his own life. He said that when he was 12 years old, he had lost his mother, that she had been sick, and he had watched her fade over 6 months until she was gone. He said he had been furious at the entire world. He had wanted to break things. He had wanted everyone around him to feel what he felt. Madison looked up at him. Whatever she had expected from this man today, it wasn't this. He told her his father hadn't lectured him, hadn't punished him for his anger, had let him rage and cry and exhaust himself. And then one day, when everything inside him had gone quiet from sheer emptiness, his father had asked him one question. He said, "If your mother could see you right now, would she recognize the boy she raised?" He held the stone out toward Madison, asked her, would her mother recognize the girl who had just thrown that stone across a courtroom? Madison took it with shaking hands and held it against her chest. She said no. She said her mother would be so disappointed. She said she would be ashamed of what she had become. Judge Caprio shook his head slowly. He told her that her mother would be heartbroken to see her in this much pain, but not ashamed. He said there was a difference between being broken and being wounded. Broken things don't come back. Wounded things do. He stood, extended his hand to her. She took it, and he helped her back to her feet. If you want to keep hearing stories like this one, moments in courtrooms where the law and something human collide, go ahead and subscribe to Frederick Explains Court. There are more of these waiting for you. He returned to the bench. The shift back into the role of judge was visible, but something in the room had changed permanently. Everyone felt it. He addressed Madison formally. He told her that by law he should remand her to custody right then. That assault on a judicial officer was a felony, that she could be tried as an adult, that she could go to prison. Madison stood straight. She said she understood, said she was sorry, said she was so sorry. He told her he was not going to do that. Murmurs broke out again. The prosecutor stepped forward. He raised his hand and asked her to let him finish. He told Madison he was going to make her an offer he had never made in 35 years on the bench. The assault charge would not be filed. The shoplifting charge would be suspended. In its place, she would report to that courthouse every Saturday for 6 months. She would sit in the courtroom and observe cases. She would help him understand the people who came through those doors in pain, because she understood something about that kind of pain that he never fully could. She would continue therapy, no exceptions. She would complete 100 hours of community service at a youth grief counselling centre, and she would apologise to her grandmother, not just in words, but through her choices over time. If she completed every part of the agreement, her record would be expunged, clean. If she violated any of it, the full consequences would be waiting. He looked at her and said, "Don't thank him, earn it." Then he nodded toward Dorothy in the gallery. Madison turned, walked slowly toward the front row, and Dorothy Pierce rose from her seat, arms already open before Madison reached her. When they met, Dorothy held her as tightly as her frail arms could manage, and Madison held on like someone who had finally stopped pretending she didn't need it. The courtroom applause started from one person and spread through every row until people were on their feet. That's the part that stays with me, honestly. Not the throw, not the stone with the word painted on it, though that detail is almost too real to believe. It's the embrace. Because Dorothy came to that courtroom knowing Madison didn't want her there, knowing she might be screamed at in front of strangers, and she came anyway. That's not obligation. That's love deciding to show up even when it's been told to stay home. And sometimes, when someone finally decides to let that kind of love in, the whole room feels it.